Okay, I'm here with Elisa Scavino, and I had the opportunity of being with Elisa in Manhattan last week, and we were at a beautiful tasting that was set up by Antonio Galoni from the Wine Advocate, and 15 of the top producers in the of Barolo were at the event. And I said, I started to think about it, and I said I would argue maybe about a few of the producers, but I think Antonio hit the nail on the head with the producers he invited. I mean, it was very unusual to have all of you in the same room together. I don't think that's ever been done before, has it?
No, it's been really the first time, and yeah, all the winemaker in person, and it was really incredible.
And from Barolo, of the 15, there was 3 women there, right?
It's true. Bruna Giacosa, there was Silvia Altare, and myself, and Marta Rinaldi as well, the daughter of Giuseppe.
Right, so there's some women getting into winemaking in Barolo, and it's traditionally, was a very, the men really kind of made wine in Italy, and especially in Barolo, because it's such an old, kind of old school, traditional kind of thing. And what do you think about the women in winemaking? What do you think? How do you think that's evolved?
I think that when you grow in a reality like ours, where every day since you're very young you're exposed to the wine world, and we sit at the table and we speak about wine, and so we play the quarter in the vineyard, in the cellar, so we grow really with in that environment, and I think you develop passion for what your parents do, and then I think my generation has also been able to appreciate the big evolution that there has been in Lagna in the last 15, 20 years. So I think we appreciate a lot what we received in heritage, and it's a beautiful work.
When I sat and I looked at the panel on Saturday, there was, there was several generations of people, women and men, all the way to Giuseppe Rinaldi, who was his first trip to the United States, and in fact didn't have a passport before he came, before this trip. And Galoni said he almost had to pull him by his hair, and I kind of believed that. And it was beautiful to hear him talk, and the passion. And really, I thought he said, and like all of you guys, like, we can go to New York, but we really need to be in Piemonte, tending to our vines, tending to our cellars, because that's what makes our wines great, is that we're family-run wineries.
Absolutely, I can agree more. We are, fortunately, every winery in our zone, I think, is really the expression of it's a unique experience. The winemaker is not just the owner, but is the person who works in the vineyard, in the cellar, so that grows the wine, and so it's.
Yeah, I think it's unlike anywhere in
true. It's pretty rare, I would say.
And we had the tremendous opportunity to preview the 2007 Barolo, and for me it was I've tasted a few, but to taste that many together, and really I think global warming has a big part to play in what's happening in Piemonte. Unlike other regions, some of the warming there, and this vintage maybe was one of the first vintages where there was very little winter, and it was kind of steady, warm, and it wasn't a very traditional kind of Piemontese harvest year, the weather.
Yeah, well, I think that in the last 5-10 years, I've seen many different vintages, so very hard to really classify with traditional or warm vintage. But I really have seen a tendency of very good acidity and very good low pH, which is really the sensation of the acid into the wine. And So a vintage can be a little bit more rich or velvet or a little bit more austere, but I always see tendentially really healthy acidity. So I think that is a particular characteristic, I think, of Nebbiolo. And at least for our winery, has always been one of the main factors to always check before harvesting. To have a good freshness. In order to have a good freshness and elegance in a wine, we need the acidity. And 2007 has been. I compare the 07 to the 90, which has been considered a classic vintage. A long time ago, it's true, there were maybe a string of years that were much more cool and wet and rainy. And so 90, when happened, was, you know, the classic but also more imponent vintage. So 07 to me has a beautiful expressive nose, a lot of fruit, so it's a very charming wine. It's rich but without losing the elegance, and has a good power, but the tannins are also very fruity and they add volume to the wine, but they're not either too mild or too aggressive. So I think the quality of the 07 is really fine. And plus I think is really about the difference in the vintage is something to enjoy. It's not so it's what a vintage can give you when you drink in the right time. You know, if we just hunt the best vintage, we lose part of what makes the wine world, I think, interesting.
I think with your Barolos in particular, for me, they're very approachable young. Like the 2007, it's the nose was, I mean, much more prevalent. It had that really like a cooler vintage nose. The aromas were great. And then it had beautiful tannins, but they were a little rounder, a little bit more elegant. And for me, and it's not even released yet, it was very, very drinkable. And this wine hasn't even been released to the market yet. So I thought this is kind of a special, for me, tasting it. And clearly you've tasted many more than I. It's a special vintage. How do you think this vintage is going to age? How do you think it's going to go? I mean, it's hard to look at that crystal ball, but do you think it's going to be one of those great vintages that we're going to be drinking these for 30 or 40 years down the road?
I'm sure. I think I have the sensation that, well, first of all, I think wine, when they're just really released, is really hard to judge. So I think the Nebbiolo needs some year to really define itself and to set down, also to get more definition.
To mature.
Yes, and you know, I believe a lot in blind tasting, and the biggest surprise I had were from vintages that no one would have expected. Didn't have great expectation, and for example, like 98, you know, was a vintage just after 96 and 97, two very strong personality vintage. 99 was another, you know, monumental vintage, and 98 was kind of really perfect, but immediately didn't have the success that deserved. It was kind of overlooked. And in the years now, you open a 98, which is you know, how many? 12 years, 13
years old.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's really a fantastic expression of Nebbiolo. We personally, my father, since the beginning, the philosophy has just always been one, and has been the expression of the vineyard, or the varietal, of the vintage. My father never liked any influence of oak. Either was a large cask or a little barrels. So he always looked for a purity of flavor and just a simple expression of the reality of the here and of the soil.
So I have a deal. Since the 2007 is not released, and I tasted it, and you sure have,
Yes.
we're gonna make an appointment for 10 years from today to retaste the 2007 somewhere, someplace. How's that sound?
Wonderful.
Thank you for talking to us. Great to see you.
Grazie.
Ciao. Vic and Verdoni, we'll be back. Verona, Italy.